going on, everybody? I'm Harrison Graham.
And I'm Chase Sr.
We launched a brand new show just a couple of weeks ago here at Chat Sports, and it's called Any Given Thursday.
We go live every single Thursday, 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific. So the video that you're about to watch aired live on that show. Make sure you subscribe and join us on our main Chat Sports YouTube channel.
NBA training camps are almost here. Harrison Graham and Chase Sr. with you. Let's talk about the Philadelphia 76ers on today's show. Drama continues to circulate around Ben Simmons. Chase, you've been all over this here on our 76ers channel, youtube.com/76erstv. 3 storylines heading into training camp. Obviously, Ben Simmons continues to be the big one.
It's the biggest story for the Sixers. It's the biggest story in the NBA right now because the Bradley Beal trade rumors have died down. It doesn't look as though Damian Lillard is going to get traded, at least at the start of the season, maybe at the NBA trade deadline. But Ben Simmons is holding out. He never wants to throw on a Sixers jersey ever again, according to Adrian Wojnarowski. And Stephen A. Smith said Ben Simmons will sit out the entire season as long as he doesn't have to play for Philadelphia. Wow. And what's funny is that NBA training camp starts on the 28th. Media Day is the 27th. So the entire organization is going to be asked about Ben Simmons until he gets traded. And I think what Daryl Morey is going to do, he's not going to give up Ben Simmons for a bag of basketballs and say, you know what, we got to get rid of the malcontent and rid ourselves of this negative relationship. He is going to wait to trade Ben Simmons until they can get an all-star player back. So this is going to linger for a little while.
Let me ask you something as I get back on screen here. Could they just wait until the trade deadline?
I think they could. I really do think they could.
With him not playing at all?
Yes. Wow. I think that could happen. We saw that it got ugly between Anthony Davis and the New Orleans Pelicans. AD, represented by Rich Paul and Clutch. Ben Simmons, represented by Rich Paul and Clutch. I hate Rich Paul. I think he has way too much power. I think he's a stiff. He's a fraud. He's only a big name because he's boys with LeBron James. And I hate the injection of power that he's given players across the NBA. I really do think it's a problem. And it's become a problem with the Sixers because this Ben Simmons drama, this Ben Simmons dilemma is going to affect Philadelphia, and it's just a dark cloud hovering over this franchise.
It's just not a good situation.
I do think the Sixers are talented enough to survive without Simmons in the regular season and win a lot of games because Embiid is going to be an MVP candidate. If Tyrese Maxey's on the team, I think he can average 15 to 20 points per game. Shout out to Marshall Green. And I think the Sixers are going to be able to escape. They're well coached. They have a good GM and an MVP candidate. So they can get by without Simmons. But long term, without his defensive ability, it is going to cost them. So I think this Simmons drama is obviously not only the biggest storyline for Philly going into training camp, it's the biggest story across the league.
Before we jump to this second point, let's ask this question. Will the Sixers get an all-star for Ben Simmons? Type Y for yes, type in for no. That is the goal. I think that becomes a lot harder moving forward. All right, point number 2, obviously the health concerns around Joel Embiid.
By the way, if you can trade Simmons away for McCollum and Rocco and picks, you just got to do it with Portland. Number 2 storyline, it's Joel Embiid's knee. I think Embiid is the MVP last year if he doesn't go down with that knee injury against the Wizards, and that hampered him somewhat from that point on until the end of the playoffs. And there was that situation in the playoffs in which Joel Embiid had a partial meniscus tear. And Embiid this offseason, Harrison, I find this to be kind of weird, never got that meniscus operated on. So if that gets worse, if that is a full tear, the Sixers season ends up being a disaster and it goes down the tubes. So that is something very important to monitor because Embiid, who looks slimmed down, he can be the MVP of the league if he can stay healthy. The biggest question for him throughout his career is his health. Lastly, how do the Sixers bounce back from that awful choke job against the Atlanta Hawks?
Yikes.
They really missed the leadership of Danny Green in that series. And if they had him, maybe they're able to survive. They bring back Danny Green, and I'm not saying that he's going to be the lone figure to help the Sixers survive. But with Doc Rivers, he choked yet again in the playoffs because he failed to make necessary adjustments throughout that series. You had Ben Simmons with that awful playoff showing as well. But that thought And that choke job against Atlanta is going to follow this team throughout the regular season and into the playoffs. And that narrative, once Philly gets into the playoffs, is going to be this. Well, they choked against the Raptors because they were up 2-1 in that series against Kawhi. Then the quadruple bounce ripped my heart out. And then 2 years ago, or 2 years later from that Toronto series, they have another 2-1 lead. They blow big lead after big lead against the Hawks, and they choke yet again in the second round. So the narrative around Philadelphia is that they can't get out of the second round. They have to dispel that narrative and throw some cold water on those flames.
Well, we'll see what happens. We'll cover it all the whole way. YouTube.com/76ers TV. My boy Chase is passionate about this team. Hopefully things go well this year. I promise you this. We'll cover it one way or the other. Make sure you guys subscribe. NBA training camps are almost here as we roll along on today's show. Chase, basketball is almost back as training camps start next week.
So much of the focus right now across America, really across the world, is on the National Football League as we go into week 3. But NBA training camp tips off next week. NBA preseason is only a couple weeks away, and then the NBA regular season starts in mid-October. We're going back to the normal NBA schedule following this COVID-shortened season and how the coronavirus kind of threw everything out of whack as far as the schedule. But here's some key dates for you that are coming up. Next week on the 27th, that's NBA Media Day for all teams across the association. On the 28th, that's when NBA training camps begin, so practices do begin to be in session. On the 3rd, the NBA preseason is starting, and then on the 19th, NBA regular season gets underway.
Yeah, and you look at that calendar, you're like, holy smokes, didn't the finals just end like a week ago?
It feels
That's
that
what
way.
It feels like, but we've had a draft, we've had a free agency period, and it's a lot of fun, man. I can't wait to get basketball back. Deep fall is the best time of year because you have the NFL, the NBA, playoff baseball, college football, and even hockey for you hockey fans. It's all happening at once. And that's coming up here in about 6 weeks when all those sports will overlap. It's nice to have the normal calendar back with the NBA. Second short offseason in a row that was shorter because of that. But moving forward, we should be back on the normal calendar, and these players should be able to adjust. And I cannot wait for opening night later in October. If you guys are as ready as we are here at Chat Sports, because hey, more NBA season means more videos for you guys. Type me down in the comments. Chase, I'm fired up, man. It's going to be fun.
I'm fired up, and I think actually the ratings might improve for the NBA in the playoffs as well as in the NBA Finals once we get back to that normal schedule for the first time in 2 seasons, because 2 years ago we had the NBA bubble, and then it's kind of weird having the NBA Finals in the middle of the summer.
Yeah.
But when you have it earlier on, I think it's a less busy time on the sporting schedule.
Well, I think people are just so comfortable with what they're used to.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, the finals are in mid-August. It's like, what?
Very weird. When
people
NFL
are ready for
is
football.
ramping up.
Yeah,
exactly.
people are ready for football. So I think the NBA is poised for a big season. I think the playoffs were a ton of fun last year. Brings momentum into this year. Should be an absolutely fantastic time. So if you're as fired up as we are, go ahead and type your me. We'll go ahead and talk about odds, MVP, playoff odds as well as we get closer and closer to the season. What do you make of Luka Doncic being the favorite to win MVP this year?
I think the odds makers see what you and I see and what a lot of other people see. I see Luka Doncic this year taking another step, and I honestly think that because of the roster construction in Dallas, he's going to have an opportunity to really carry the offensive load more so than in previous seasons, and he's already had a massive usage rate, but I do see his points per game increasing up to maybe 33 points per game, so I think that's realistic that Luka is going to be able to win his first MVP award, which will really add to his legacy throughout his career. I mean, you compare his first 3 seasons with the first 3 seasons of LeBron James, they have been nearly identical all across the board. And I think Steph Curry, coming off that historic second half of the season last year in which he was just straight up on fire, dropping 30, 40-point games any given night. That's why you see him at 5-1 odds. Giannis, he really solidified himself as one of the greatest players in the history of the NBA with how he played in the NBA Finals.
His resume of 2 MVPs in a Finals and a Finals MVP, he could retire tomorrow and go into the Hall.
So him and Michael Jordan, the only players at this point of their respective careers to win an NBA championship, an NBA MVP, a Finals MVP, and Defensive Player.
Wow.
So that goes to show you the historic proportions in which Giannis is off to in his career. And then if Embiid doesn't get hurt last year
he might
with
have
that
won
knee injury at 7-1 odds, I kind of like the value value there because I thought he would have been the MVP if he didn't get hurt.
Then, of course, LeBron's always in the mix. Kevin Durant's
at
in the mix
12-1 as well.
A lot of guys at plus 1,200. We just gave the King some props there because he's been doing it for a long time. But then you look at NBA title odds. No surprise at the top three, Chase. Brooklyn, L.A., Milwaukee. Then Golden State at plus 1,100. The Jazz at plus 1,400. I think people forget the Jazz were the best regular season team last year.
Yeah.
And if Mike Conley doesn't get banged up in the playoffs, same with Donovan Mitchell, who's dealing with an ankle issue, maybe that team wins it all last year.
I thought you made a good point earlier when you said the NBA playoffs last year were really entertaining. They were jam-packed with action. They really were. And I think what's great going into this year, both the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference are so deep, and I think there's going to be so much parity across the league. Yeah. I know that the Nets and Lakers are obvious title favorites, but if they don't win the title next year, I'm not going to be surprised at all. And what you also saw in the playoffs last year is the emergence of some young superstars who were next up behind the LeBrons as well as the Stephs across the league.
Booker.
So going into this year, there is so much momentum, and I love it.
I absolutely cannot wait for the season. It's going to be a lot of fun. Who do you guys think will win it all this upcoming year in the 2021-2022 NBA season? Who's going to be the champs? Get your votes in right now down in the comments section. And while you're at it, subscribe to us here at Chat Sports. You're watching any given Thursday. We go live every single Thursday, 5 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Central Time, 2 o'clock Pacific. So subscribe and join us, youtube.com/chatsportstv. We'll continue to have you guys covered on the NFL, NBA, college football, and everything else in between as well. So go ahead and subscribe.